Hello everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of an experiment called Life with Alex McKenzie. As always, this episode is brought to you by Punchline Nutrition. Punchline Nutrition is a supplement company that I started, and our best-selling product that I always recommend everyone is NeuroBoost. So NeuroBoost is a nootropic, it's a brain and focus formula, basically like a multivitamin for your brain. I've been taking nootropics for over like a decade now, and I think that they really help me when I'm on stage, before I write, before I do anything. I always take NeuroBoost. And then big fan of pre-workout. That's how I started getting so jacked, a little bit of pre-workout, some creatine. So go to Punchline Nutrition, go check all that stuff out. Use coupon code ATJ to save yourself 10% on any and all products. And then the other thing that's happening right now is the Happy Camper Comedy Tour. Part 2 Winter Edition is on sale. So we're heading to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PI, Newfoundland, Quebec, Ontario, and the Northwest Territories. So all those shows are on sale now. Go to alexhilljokes.com, grab yourself some tickets, and I can't wait to meet you guys and have you all laugh at me. So this episode is actually, it's one I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I've been thinking about it, and I was back in my parents' basement here for Christmas, and I found one of my old journals, so I pulled it out and read some stuff, and I was like, okay, I think I got to talk about this, but it's about being diagnosed with depression. So back in 2017, I believe, I was clinically diagnosed with depression before it was cool to be depressed, before TikTok got a hold of it. And I just think it was like one of the worst things you can get is like being told you're depressed, because what it did is it made me feel powerless. I was just like, oh, yep, chemical imbalance in the brain. And then I just lost all accountability. I was like, well, it's not my fault. Just got dealt a bad deck of cards, that are missing a few, not 52 in the deck. But yeah, to give you guys an idea, I've got 5 things I was going to talk about that have helped me deal with depression and dig my way out of it. But to start, I want to give you an idea of how bad it was. So this is probably going to be tough to read or feel awkward. And Mom, I am sorry for reading this in public, because my mother is not going to like me talking about this publicly. So this is February 26th, 2017. And here's my entry. I go, this past weekend was the scariest time of my life. I completely lost control of my thoughts, and I suffered greatly for it. This is really hard to write about. So I turned to drugs and alcohol to help me with my anger. These drugs only sent my mind into a much worse place. I feared that I would commit suicide. I don't know if I actually would or not if I didn't have friends and the lack of a gun. But that is the scariest part about it, not knowing whether or not you would do it. I was driving my truck Saturday to go to Enjoy for a Byron Katie workshop, which we'll talk more about those later. That was actually very helpful. As I sped down the highway in my truck, I noticed the large telephone poles on the shoulder of the highway. The first thought that came to my mind was, this could be all over right now if you drive into that pole. Then as the truck approached the pole, I questioned if I was going to do it, and that terrified me. So I took a firm grip of the wheel, focused on the road ahead, and I looked away. I never want to go back to that mental state again. I'm going to do everything in my power to never get back to that place. I gained a lot of powerful insight from Colette's workshop that afternoon. I believe it gave me the tools necessary to take back control of my life. It's an amazing gift that woman has. She possesses the gift of healing. Something I gained from that workshop was the thought of doing things for myself. I've now come up with the saying, I help others for myself, because I'm now beginning to believe that you must do everything for yourself. At that workshop, I also learned that we're looking for 3 things when we interact with other humans. Those 3 things are love, appreciation, and approval. You should be able to give yourself those 3 things, leading back to doing everything for yourself. So when I help others, rather than expecting to receive anything from them, I'll give them to myself. I love myself. I appreciate myself for what I do for others. I believe I'm a good person, and I don't need someone else's approval. I never realized how heavily I relied on other people to receive these things. No one more than my past girlfriends. I've been spending years trying to go outside and get things that were inside me all along. I just need to learn how to get it out. So that is where my brain was back in 2017. So that was just over 2 years before I quit my job to pursue comedy. So I quit my job May 25th of 2019, I think was like my final official day, but my last day at work was in April sometime. But anyway, I'm doing much, much better now, and I'm very happy and hopeful. And I made a list today in my journaling of 5 things that help me with my depression. So number 1, right out of the gate, was accountability. So like one of the biggest changes in my life was when I started taking accountability for my own life. I remember for like 3 to 4 years in my mid to late 20s, before I quit my job, everything was everyone else's fault. Like I was very unhappy and I was very upset and I was mad at the world for it. I thought that we needed government reform. I thought that, we needed society to make major changes. And I was like that for, like I said, about 3 to 4 years until finally I realized, I'm like, dude, I think you can complain about this until the day you die and nothing's going to change. That's when I realized that I had to take accountability for my own life. It was like, okay, so nobody said you had to work at this pulp mill. That was not a thing. You were just doing it. That was your choice. So you can quit this job. And nobody said you had to have a mortgage and a house. And it was like, so you can sell this house. That is your choice. And you don't have to do any of this stuff if you don't want. So then my plan was like, I'm going to sell everything, buy a van, and I was going to go drive to Central America. That was like the move before comedy really came in. But one of the big factors in helping me do that was actually Jordan Peterson. So I read Jordan Peterson's book. It's like 12 Rules for Life. And he was very good at getting you. He has that thing, that like classic meme, clean up your room. And it's like, hey, maybe start worrying about what you're doing before somebody else. You worry about what someone else is doing, And just when you start taking that accountability, a lot of people, I found something in life, people don't like anyone who tells you to take accountability. They're like, hey man, maybe it's your fault that things aren't going the way you want. And people don't want to hear that. And then people hate that person. So just remember, it was Jordan Peterson who said that, not me. So get mad at him. And there's a really good book, actually. It's about, what is it here? It is The Gulag Archipelago. And it's by Alexander, I'm going to blow this. It's like Solzhenitsyn, I think. But the book is about, like, he ended up in a Russian gulag, and it's like, what responsibility of it was his that got him there? Like, it'd be very easy to be like, this isn't my fault. They threw me in the gulag, these, crazy anarchists. But he was, I don't know if you'd say mature enough. Anyway, he was like, what responsibility do I have? What role did I play in me ending up here? Whether it was not standing up to the regime or, should have, however it goes. But I just think that's so valuable. Is like, you're in control of your life. You really are. And everything is a decision, Like I remember guys at the mill would always say to me, I wish I could just quit my job and go drive around in a van. And I'm like, here, you want to know how? Come with me. You see that lady right there? Tell her you're not coming in ever again. You never have to come back here. And it's all just like choices you make, And then people are like, well, you're lucky you don't have a wife or kids. And you're like, you think that was just on accident? Like that was by design. Like I knew that I wanted to go be a gypsy. And I knew that I couldn't have a family if I wanted to do that. So it was a tough choice that I made, was to be like, okay, you gotta just stay on your own and do this by yourself. And yeah, it's hard. But anyway, accountability. That was number 1. Number 2, and this is a really good one. Number 2 thing is like having something to look forward to. So I think it's very, very important to have something to look forward to. I remember the first time I really realized that this was something important was I was like, I think I was 14 years old. I was dating a girl, Denise, and I loved going to school. And I was so excited because every day when I got to school, I would see Denise. And it was like super, I was like, oh man, I just love this girl and it was the best. And then she broke up with me. I think it was in the summer. Anyway, broke up with me. And then all of a sudden, every day was dark. The next day you wake up, orange juice just doesn't taste as good. And you're trying to figure it out. And I was like, man, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do any of this. Like, why? I used to love that. And I realized that, like, every day you used to have something you were getting up to look forward to and go and do. So I think that's very important to do. And it's like, there's a really good book, another one that I read called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And his whole thing is about, he's a Jewish psychologist who survived Auschwitz. So it's very, very interesting, him talking about it. But he came up with a theory of logotherapy, which is your life has to have purpose and meaning. And he said anyone who survived Auschwitz were people who could find meaning in the suffering. They were basically like, hey, because they would keep you alive as a prisoner as long as you could work. They're like, yeah, build a railroad, dig a ditch, as long as you could do that, they wouldn't kill you. But as soon as you couldn't, they're like, hey, get them out of here. Now, I lost my train of thought. What was it? Oh yeah. So he said anyway, the people who were able to find purpose in the suffering, they were the ones who survived. Anyone was like, I'm going through this so that I can see my family again. I'm going through this so I can see my daughter. Like, anyone who had that mentality survived, and anyone who lost that hope, he said they just got sick and they would die. So it's like you got to have something to look forward to in your future, and I think that is a very, very key thing about it all. Number 3, okay, finding your values. So when I was like depressed, you're trying to figure it out. Like, you don't really know who you are, like what you're doing, and you're like, well, I'm sad, but I don't know what I want to do. And what you want to do is kind of a different question, but I think it's more about like, who do you want to be? That is the question to ask yourself, is like, who do I want to be in this world? And if you're trying to figure out your values, this is one I learned in therapy, and it's really good. It was, they get you to picture your funeral in 3 years' time. And then they say, what would you want like a family member to say about you? What would you want a friend to say about you? And what would you want a coworker to say about you? So family member, you'd want them to be like, oh, he was so loving and kind, and a friend, you'd be like, oh, he was dependable and trustworthy. A coworker would be like, oh, he was honest and hardworking. So then now you have what your core values are. You're like, oh, you want to be a hardworking person. You want to be honest, trustworthy, kind, loving, caring. So then you start realizing that these are your values. And then as you go throughout your day, start acting out the way you're like, well, what would a kind person do in this situation? What would a caring person do in this situation? How would a hardworking person act if they had to do this task? And then you start acting out those ideals, and then you start becoming the person that you want to be. And then you can look back on it and you'll get a great sense of joy out of it. And that's what I found. Okay. Another one was meditation and prayer. So I got really big into meditation when I was depressed because I didn't want to go on antidepressants. They just didn't seem like the answer. It didn't seem like the right thing, because it was, I'm sure it works for people, and I would never tell anyone else what they should or shouldn't do, but I just didn't want to do it because I was like, this seems like kind of like putting a Band-Aid on, and then at some point you're gonna have to take the Band-Aid off. And that's kind of how they give you, they say it's like analogous to breaking your leg. They're like, if you broke your leg, would you get a cast put on and crutches? You're like, well, yes. And they're like, well, that's what the idea behind these are. These are your cast until you can get to a better mental state, then come off them. But I just found most people left the cast on forever, and I would not do that. So meditation was a really good one. It just taught me that like our mind controls our reality. And I remember the first time I sat down to do a meditation, close my eyes, you're like, focus on your breath. Don't get 2 breaths in before you're like, hey man, remember when you pushed your brother down the stairs in grade 3? You're a jerk. And you're like, oh man, I'm such a jerk. And then you're like, oh yeah, the meditation, back to the breath. Then you breathe in, breathe out. Don't get another 2 in. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, remember when you farted at that gym that time on the leg press machine at the YMCA when you were trying to impress those girls when you were 16? That was so embarrassing. And they all laughed and ran out. It was like, you're a loser. And then you're like, oh yeah, dude, meditate, focus, back to the breath. Breathe another 2 in. And then you get, what should I have for lunch today? I wonder what I'm doing. I should probably call Steve later. And it's like, you realize, like in that 5-minute meditation, I had like 30 to 40 different thoughts come in. And I realized if I were to attach to any of them, my mind would have went to a different place. Like if I thought of something sad, it's like, well, now today's going to be a sad day. If I thought of something, fun, it was going to be a fun day. And then you realize, you're like, everything is in here, man. It's all in your mind. And it became very, very important to start paying attention to my thoughts and being able to dismiss them. A really good acronym they teach you in meditation was RAIN. So it's like recognize, acknowledge, investigate, non-identify. And the non-identify or non-attachment is the biggest lesson there. So what it is first you recognize. So you're like, I recognize I'm feeling something. I'm like, I'm a little off. What is it? So you investigate. And then you're like, okay, I'm feeling nervous about my upcoming comedy show. So I'm nervous. And then you acknowledge it. So you go, okay, I acknowledge that I'm nervous about my upcoming comedy show. And then non-attachment is don't attach to that feeling. So before, and that's again like with depression, but I think something that happens is we identify with our feelings or our thoughts and we think that's us when it's not really us. So it's like, you attach to it nervous. So you go, oh, I'm a nervous person. And you're like, no, 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 do not do that. What you do is you say, I am a person who's feeling nervous. And then it's just a passing weather system, and then you let it go and then you're going to come back to baseline later. So that was a really good one. Another one I do now is I pray. So, I just pray a lot now with my little vision board and stuff. And I really like it. It really, really helps me. It gives me a good little feeling, warm, fuzzy feeling inside whenever I do it. Number 5. So this was like how I started figuring out that comedy was something I wanted to do, or just how I even just got into deciding what I wanted to do. Because then, once you quit your job and you have all this time, and you don't have to quit your job, but here's the thing, you go sit down and write down what is your ideal day from start to finish. What would a perfect day look like to you? And for me it was I like journaling in the morning, then I like writing jokes, exercising, playing with my dog Finley outside. What else did I put on there? Eat healthy food, go and do comedy, and then play video games with my friends at the end of the night. And it was that would be an ideal day. So I was okay, now let's start trying to find a way that we can structure our days to have those ideal days. And then it just kind of went from there. And then now after, I guess it's 5.5 years now that I've been on my own here, just casing this thing. And I get to live my ideal day almost every day. Short of I need to get to a big city and get a place there so that I can do comedy every night, because I would love to do that. But yeah, those are 5 things that I have found that have really helped me with depression and sadness. And I hope they help you guys. And you can tell me that I'm an idiot in the comments if you want. Or you can send me all the loves, the little hearts, or how do the new kids do it? They do it like this. This is a heart. And yeah, but thank you guys for listening. I love all of you. And don't forget to go to alextellsjokes.com. Check out the Happy Camper Comedy Tour coming to a city near you. All right, take care of each other.